Welcome to UN Insider. I'm Elaine Reyes at the United Nations headquarters in New York. Join us as we delve into the world's most pressing issues and learn how the people inside work toward a better future for everyone around the world.
Coming up on UN Insider.
Where will the civilian go? There is absolutely no safe place in Rafah anymore.
More calls for a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas as conditions inside Gaza deteriorate and concern about a wider conflict grows.
The global food crisis is creating a hellscape of hunger and heartache for many of the world's poorest people. And the climate crisis is accelerating with a deadly force.
A triple threat: how food insecurity, climate change, and conflict are impacting peace and security around the globe. And flying the environmentally friendly skies: how one airport is becoming a hub for sustainability. Next.
Conflict in the Middle East and the resulting humanitarian issues remains a top priority for diplomats here at UN headquarters.
The Middle East region sits on the verge of extreme danger. The pressing priority in front of us all is the push for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza to take tangible, effective, and responsible measures to prevent a further spread of the conflict to the wider region. The countries concerned, in particular, need to heed the strong appeals from the international community, especially countries and peoples in the region. Cease and desist from obstructing the Council's actions and genuinely join in the efforts to bring about an early ceasefire in Gaza.
While international negotiators in Cairo try to broker a ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas, UN officials are expressing concern about the worsening situation in Gaza. People face dire conditions. Some aid is getting in, but it is not enough. And Israeli troops continue their push in the territory. They could soon move into the southernmost city of Rafah, where more than half of Gaza's population is currently located.
If this military operation is taking place, the question is, where will the civilian go? There is absolutely no safe place in Rafah anymore, and the fear is that the number of people killed and injured might again significantly increase.
Xu Dejia is monitoring developments inside the halls of the UN. Dejia.
Yes, Elaine. This week, the discussion on the upcoming Israeli military operation in Rafah took center stage. Rafah is located at the southmost of Gaza Strip, neighboring to Egypt. Now, more than 1 million displaced Palestinians currently live in Rafah and surrounding areas. For Israel, the government believes that this is the last stronghold of Hamas. They have to wipe out possible Hamas militants in Rafah. For the United Nations, and most of the international communities, the concern is still the same: disproportionate reaction and collective punishment on Gaza people. To be exact, two things are vitally important here. First, where can those civilians go, given the fact that the north has already been pretty destroyed by the war? And second, what destiny will it be for the most important humanitarian delivery corridor, a Rafah border crossing?
What is the position of the Secretary General on this offensive? Did he feel disappointed, worried, concerned, condemned?
Look, we saw again Palestinians being killed yesterday. What we need is a humanitarian ceasefire. The Secretary General feels it's extremely important to have this humanitarian ceasefire. We also saw yesterday the release of 2 Israeli hostages, which we very much welcome the fact that these 2 have regained their freedom, and it's important to see the immediate and unconditional release of all remaining hostages.
So, in exchange of more than 100 deaths of Palestinians,
I think
That's what happened yesterday.
I understand what you're asking. What I'm saying to you is that we want to see a stop to the civilian deaths, right? We've condemned over and over again the deaths of civilians. We also want to see all the hostages released.
Another development here is yet another potential Security Council draft resolution. Represented by Security Council member state Algeria, Arab countries submitted a new draft resolution demanding yet again, yes, an immediate ceasefire. According to Riyad Mansour, permanent observer of the State of Palestine to the United Nations, the group of countries had meetings with almost every Security Council member states and gained what they called massive support. But the question remains, will the U.S. veto the draft resolution? Last year, neither of the two resolutions adopted by the Security Council mentioned about ceasefire because of the objection of the United States. Will it be different this time? Legendary UN reporter Edith Lederer asked this question.
Linda Thomas Greenfield made clear that the United States opposes the Algerian draft resolution. And what makes you think that this resolution could be adopted with such a negative response from the United States?
We as Arab group and also a smaller group from the Arab groups, we had, very frank discussions with the representative of the United States, Linda. And we appreciate her efforts for engaging her government in Washington to see that there is a strong call from the entire international community to act and the Security Council to act. We appreciate that. But of course, the internal business of the United States is their business. We believe that it is high time now for the Security Council to decide on a humanitarian ceasefire resolution.
So, did the ambassador answer this question? After the stakeout, we, UN correspondents on site, unanimously believe it's a big no, which means there's no guarantee that U.S. will let this draft resolution pass if it remains unedited. So we do hope the Council itself could be as united as us, the correspondents, to cover the UN. That's all from me this week. Elaine.
Shudaja, thanks. Sudan has been locked in a bloody conflict since April. The UN estimates 25 million people in Sudan will need humanitarian assistance this year. But the effort to get aid in has been a difficult one.
30-year-old Zahra Muhammad is a mother of two. She was forced to flee from her home in Khartoum to Port Sudan in a desperate bid to find shelter and food for her two children.
I came here to feed my children after we experienced hunger. I'm pregnant and I need special diet. All we get now is one meal and tea in the morning. The situation is really bad.
There were once hopes that Sudan would become East Africa's breadbasket, but the country is now unable to feed its own population. The World Food Programme says the hunger crisis is deepening as the conflict continues, with reports of some people even starving to death. With the fighting now in its 10th month, nearly 80 million people are facing acute hunger.
About 5 million people are experiencing emergency levels of food insecurity, with over 3/4 of them cornered in areas where humanitarian access has been hampered and in some areas impassable due to ongoing fighting in large parts of the country.
A new food security report for Sudan shows the highest levels of hunger ever recorded during the harvest season that runs from October to February. The deteriorating economy and high inflation have also made life more difficult for traders.
The prices are changing every day and we can't provide enough food despite the need. The prices are skyrocketing and importing is difficult due to the high value of foreign currencies and an unstable market.
The World Food Programme is warning the situation could get much worse, and time is running out ahead of the next lean season in May. Its feared conflict hotspots could face catastrophic levels of hunger unless they get more food assistance. Naba Muhyiddin, CGTN, Port Sudan.
Coming up,
I am dismayed to say that our world today is teeming with examples of the devastating relationship between hunger and conflict.
UN Insider.
Modern vitality, born of ancient civilizations. Asia exemplifies diversity in its best sense and welcomes changes at the fastest pace. Asia Today brings you the headlines from the most populous continent, puts in focus politics, economies, and faces, and takes you on a tour of the sights from the region and beyond.
Maintaining international peace and security is one of the UN's key missions. Issues like climate change and food insecurity are complicating that mission.
Food insecurity has left many in the world hungry. Last year, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations and the World Food Programme warned that it's likely to get worse, with countries like Burkina Faso, Mali, South Sudan and Sudan topping the list. There's now concern about the Palestinian territories. Guyana, which holds the presidency of the Security Council, has convened a high-level meeting to discuss the impact of climate change and food insecurity on international peace and security.
The Security Council must take in account the consequential effects on food security and climate in addressing the issues of conflict and war. And these issues are intricately linked to the rule of law, democracy, and governance. They are all interconnected.
The hostilities in the Gaza Strip have left thousands of people dependent on humanitarian aid. The UN Secretary General says, where wars rage, hunger reigns.
I am dismayed to say that our world today is teeming with examples of the devastating relationship between hunger and conflict. In Syria, almost 13 million people go to bed hungry after a decade of war and a horrendous earthquake. In Gaza, no one has enough to eat. Of the 700,000 hungriest people in the world, 4 in 5 inhabit that tiny strip of land.
Climate change, conflicts and food insecurity remain a complex phenomenon according to the United Nations. In 2023, 2.4 billion people experienced moderate or severe food insecurity. And according to a report by the State of Food Security and Nutrition in the World, nearly 600 million people are projected to be chronically undernourished by 2023.
We face significant gaps in funding for climate action, and adaptation finance needs are at least 10 times greater than current international public financial flows. Developing countries, excluding China, need $2.4 trillion every year to build clean energy economies and adapt to climate impacts.
Guyana says while the Security Council is entrusted with ensuring international peace and security, it must take a holistic approach which includes climate change and food insecurity. China says the right to food is a basic human right and should be respected and guaranteed by all countries. It has called for targeted action to help developing countries break the cycle of hunger and conflict. Jody Jacob, CGTN, New York.
This year, Guyana and 4 other nations started 2-year terms as members of the UN Security Council. This month, Guyana holds the Council presidency. I sat down with Carolyn Rodriguez-Burkett, Guyana's ambassador to the UN. Ambassador, thank you so much for joining us. 2024 began with Guyana starting its term as an elected member of the UN Security Council. And now you're holding the presidency for the very busy month of February amid many global conflicts. What are you hoping to accomplish during your time?
We have hit the ground running with the presidency coming just 1 month after we assumed the seat on the council. We're going to be having about 16 mandated meetings on many different issues, from Somalia to Libya, the Middle East. There will be a debate on the impact of climate change and food insecurity on maintenance of international peace and security. What we're hoping to do is to advance that debate, because there are still some hesitance in some quarters about discussing climate in a security context. But the great majority of UN member states have agreed that this is a very, very important link that we must discuss.
What is your country's view on peace and security issues? Are you optimistic that we could see some progress on a ceasefire in Gaza?
We must be optimistic, because when we lose hope, then we lose everything. And we believe that the time for a ceasefire was a long time ago, and so the sooner the better. But let me also say that Guyana has always supported the two-state solution. We believe that Israel and Palestine can live side by side in peace and harmony, if not harmony, tolerance. And I say that because Guyana is a country of 6 different peoples. Many of our peoples, their descendants, were brought there as slaves, as indentured servants. And we have managed to build a country that has religious harmony, not tolerance, harmony, where we celebrate our diversity, whether it's in religion, whether it's in ethnicity. And we believe that this is possible all over the world, but we have to invest in diversity. When we look at what is happening in many parts of the world, we also see, though, that there's a big aspect that is related to development. And if we do not invest in development in many of these countries, we will continue to see conflicts increase.
And do you feel strongly that that kind of perspective as a smaller nation can really make a difference at the UN Security Council?
We're a low-lying state. The capital city, it's almost 2 meters below sea level. So we know what it is when it comes to climate change. We know what it is when it comes to living together as a people. We know what possible conflicts are as well. And so we think that coming to the council as a small state, bringing the voice of a small state, it's important as we discuss the peace and security in the wider world.
Your country has the fastest growing economy in the world. No doubt you've seen the change. What have you learned from other countries to grow in a more sustainable way?
Well, I guess we have seen that rapid injection of resources can sometimes be a curse in some places, but it can also be a blessing. And for us in Guyana, for many years, the government that I'm from, we knew what we wanted as a country. We knew the kind of infrastructure we wanted. We knew that the education and health facilities and services, we know what we wanted. What was missing was adequate resources. We did what we can with what we had back then, but now we have some more resources that we can adequately address these issues. So the country is in a period of rapid transformation.
We also have to ask you about Guyana's significant natural resources that also play a part of that as well. How do you plan for that and to make sure that your people are the ones who benefit the most?
For many years, we have treated our natural resource base in a very prudent manner. We have a country with more than 80% of it covered with forest. And it is not, I would say, by accident that it remains standing. It's because of policies that we've put in place over the years, and this has been beneficial to us. And we have said that even as we grow, we will continue with those policies, preserving our forests for future generations to come. But it's also not just a benefit to Guyana. It contributes to the lungs of the world.
So 2030, just a few years away. How do you feel about your country's progress in reaching the Sustainable Development Goals?
We just had what is called here in the United Nations a voluntary national review of the progress we've made with certain SDGs. And so when you look at housing, when you look at water, when you look at education, health, we've made significant progress, but we still have more to do. And we are going to exert all our efforts to ensure that we achieve the 2030 agenda. But let me add to say that the 2030 agenda is a global agenda, and we recognize that many countries face tremendous difficulties at this point in time. And so we will continue to advocate for the reform of the financial architecture. It's still very difficult for developing countries to access finance at a reasonable cost. They still face many, many challenges with the impacts of climate change. When we take our Caribbean, for example, one hurricane can wipe out your entire GDP. So Guyana will continue to advocate for those global reforms.
Ambassador, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate you joining us.
Thank you.
Coming up.
We want to make sure that we're really good environmental stewards.
UN Insider.
Air travel results in more harmful emissions than any other forms of transportation. The UN's International Civil Aviation Organization is working to help the aviation industry reach carbon neutrality by 2050. Some airports are also choosing a more sustainable path. Francis Coe takes us to one airport that is setting a green example.
San Diego International Airport is one of the busiest single-runway commercial airports in the world.
The airports are like little cities.
More than 1 million passengers roll through its terminals every month. But the airport offers more than the friendly skies. It's raising the bar on protecting planet Earth.
It's a race to the top, if you will, in terms of the great things that airports are doing.
Chad Reese is in charge of what San Diego International Airport is doing when it comes to sustainability, developing measures in the green program the airport adopted a decade ago. He's one of 2 environmental affairs managers here, heading efforts to ease the airport's carbon footprint. The airport operates on 100% renewable electricity, powering its fleet of more than 30 electric buses and charging stations, generating 5 megawatts of solar energy from the solar panels blanketing the carport roofs. Even passengers can play a role through the airport's pioneering Good Traveler program.
But did you know flying releases carbon dioxide into the atmosphere?
It allows passengers to calculate how much carbon is emitted during their flights, then pay an amount to help offset those carbon emissions by donating to an environmental conservation project. Since it started in 2015, it's gained 10 airport partners and removed an estimated 120,000 metric tons of carbon from the atmosphere.
Which is the equivalent of about 700 million air miles traveled.
Another sustainability measure involves the airport's biggest tenants, the airlines, of course, and their commitment to reducing their carbon footprint. And it all happens down this runway behind me.
If an aircraft plugs into the power that's provided at every one of our gates and they turn off their jet engines, they quit using aircraft fuel and they're using renewable electricity, to power the airplanes.
And whether passengers are taking off or landing, they'll pass through terminals relying on a sustainable water supply.
We've captured and reused over 5 million gallons of water.
Kara Nager is the airport's second environmental affairs manager, focusing on water quality and conservation. Stormwater is captured by a 3 million gallon cistern, as well as atop a parking plaza, preventing runoff into nearby waterways.
That cistern is able to capture about 78 acres of water on the north side of our campus. The end goal is for that cistern to be connected to our rental car center, which is just across the street, so that we can wash vehicles with recycled water.
Some of the water passes through this treatment facility to help heat and cool the terminals, then piped to the landscaped areas around the airport. That green spirit inspired in part by the airport's location.
We're right next to downtown, we're right next to San Diego Bay, which has a lot of recreation. We're in the heart of a residential area.
The airport acknowledges being environmentally friendly can sometimes be an upward climb. But in a space with plenty of comings and goings, the spirit of sustainability is here to stay.
We want to make sure that we're really good environmental stewards.
Frances Coe, CGTN, San Diego.
I'm Elaine Reyes at UN headquarters in New York. Thanks for being a UN Insider.